It's the wave of the UV wave coming at you. Yeah, gonna kill all that bacteria, all that corona. Greg, we had Mark Ray on the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast, man. That was amazing.
Yeah, awesome guest, guy that you need to talk to. You need to hear from if you want to know about UV lighting, and you got to know about UV lighting. So listen to this.
Yeah, and if you want to know more about UV lighting, you can take LS Evolve. Ooh, baby. Come on.
That'll get you going.
But before we get into the amazing conversation with Mark Ray, that could be the podcast of the year. But you got to go back to the original. That's right. Who's the original? You know who the original is, listener. It's Energy Focus. ENERGYFOCUS.com, Greggy. The original.
That's right. And guess what they're doing? They're getting in the UV lighting. They're in the UV, not getting in. They're in it.
Come on.
And it's coming out hot. New product.
Right into the deep end.
Right into the deep end. And, you know, they took their time to develop it. They didn't just throw this out there and say, hey, we got UV. We're ready to go. They are developing it, getting the right product, and it's coming. 3 new unique items, and I love the names of them. Nuvo, it's N, and a big UV, O. A portable UVC disinfection tower. Then there's above, that's AB, UV, an integrated LED circadian lighting, and UVC air disinfection troffer. And then there's Move, and that's spelled MUVE. That's an autonomous UVC surface disinfection robot. You got 3 hot products coming on the UV train. Be ready for it.
The marketing guy at Energy Focus must be a genius, man. Those are good names for those products. Holy macaroni, so original. Come on. Yeah. Go to energyfocus.com. That's ENERGYFOCUS. Proud members of the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors. Go to NAILD.org. We got the best education, son. I know for sure. So get educated, get associated, get your peeps taking our programs. But before you do any of that, here comes Mark Ray. We have Mark S. Ray, PhD, back again on the Get a Grip on Lighting podcast. Thanks for joining us today, Mark.
No, real pleasure. Thank you.
Greg, I have a feeling you were texting me that back and forth this morning on the stuff that came out. Why don't you start us off today?
Yeah, well, the big discussion we want to get into is this publication on UV lighting. But before we do, just give us the LRC update. Where are you guys at? What's going on over there? The Lighting Research Center. What are we doing?
We'll be transitioning, I think, nearly everyone, not everyone. I think Dr. Narendra and John Paul and Indica will stay here, but everyone else is transitioning to Mount Sinai School of Medicine. What's interesting, the hospital headquarters is in New York City, but the difference between the price per square foot in Manhattan and the price per square foot in Troy is quite considerable. So we're going to create a laboratory here in the Capital District. And of course, with much more virtual communications, we think that's going to be pretty effective. But broadly, our mission hasn't changed. It's called the Light and Health Research Center is the new name. And yet we see health in the broadest terms. So we'll continue not only our work in circadian rhythms, but we've been doing a lot in disinfection, which we'll talk about today. For plants and animals, we're using UV to improve vitamin D production. We're still going to do transportation. We're doing some, I think, very innovative work related to reducing the glare and chaos that emergency lighting on police and EMS vehicles are. We're always been committed to energy efficiency and sustainability, so we have a very strong effort there looking at control systems on the West Coast. So the mission stays broadly the same, but we think that being associated with a hospital or being within a school of medicine really changes the game for lighting. Lighting has, maybe you don't agree, but I've always seen it as consistently going down and down into a commodity product. And yet light has such impact on people and plants. And, I'm hoping that this is a real renaissance. Much like the LRC started the first graduate program in lighting, a lot of educational programs now. I think this emphasis is going to transform the industry again in the, I'll call it the academic arena anyway. And what I hope is that we'll see some new products, new applications. But I have to say, lighting's kind of stuck in the past. And I think we see this as a path to not just survival, but bigger influence socially, globally.
I think one of the one of the traps that we fall into in terms of terminology, so human-centric lighting, health, these types of words we use. A lot of times when people think of health, they think of curing sick people rather than increasing wellness. You understand what I mean? And I think that the thrust of this integrative lighting that, Dr. Figueroa, Dr. Veach, yourself talk about and kind of evangelize, and Adam Lillian from the UL, I think we're also talking about a wellness play that light is so pervasive and so taken for granted that we can really utilize billions of light fixtures in the internal environment and the external environment. If we improve those sources, we could see, a 4% or a 2% or a 3% increase in wellness, say. That would be enormous if we could do that. It would be a massive increase. So it's not just about curing sick people or specific diseases. I think it's about, in a sense, increasing the wellness of our internal environments. Is that a safe assumption?
I think so. I'm pretty agnostic with regard to the terms, but as a researcher, you have to convert everything into something you can measure. So and it's true that we show time and time again that giving bright light during the day and dim light at night will increase sleep duration, it increases sleep consolidation. And those things, better sleep, works for sick people, but it also works for you and me. So we've kind of, in the circadian realm, we've concentrated specifically on sleep as the outcome measure, which is well-being and it is health. And so, in no way am I disagreeing with you. I just am always compelled to try to bring it down to something I can actually measure. And then we can use it how we want to use it for health or well-being.
Well, I think that when you get that, when those measurements, and I think it's happening now, we had a great talk with Adam Lillian and Brian from the GSA about their study, that the work they did, and they're very confident. For us, we can't wait to start swinging through the trees with knives in our teeth selling this. Believe me, man, we're ready for it. Greg, what else you got?
Yeah, well, I wanted to just kind of roll right into this publication. So what is it called? I was trying to find a title. It says it's an abstract. What are you guys calling this paper?
Well, it's part of our long-standing series from the National Lighting Product Information Program. It's called Lighting Answers, but it deals specifically with UV disinfection. Now, we had a bit of a stretch because technically 405 nanometers is not ultraviolet, but it's all aimed at the same sort of thing. So we've called that disinfection lighting, so UV disinfection. So anyway, the point is that we don't want to get hung up on the words. We just want to make sure that we're delivering good lighting in the sense of ultraviolet, which is of course an oxymoron for ultraviolet, but that's really what it's aimed at.
I like how it's formatted in a question and answer session. Who provided the questions for this? How did that come about?
We did a survey of specifiers. We've done that for years and years. I've always been sensitive to being too much in the ivory tower. Sometimes academics just write what they want, but we've always had very strong connections with specifiers, and they've been very generous in providing us the kind of input we need to ask those good questions. So there is a survey results that you'll see there. For example, safety is one of the number one concerns. If I put this in, is anybody going to be harmed? Whereas they care less about, degrading your watercolor on the wall. I'm not saying that's not important. It's just not what they're attuned to. So safety, for example, is one of the things that you get a clear picture on when you have that close connection with specifiers.
And at what point did you guys decide you were going to do something with this? Where were you at where you're like, all right, we need to put something together and formalize it?
Well, as I mentioned, we've been working with ultraviolet for some time now, and we felt that we knew enough about safety, how to measure it, which the Lighting Research Center is unique in its ability to make those measurements. So we could provide tangible information to people. I don't know what your impression is, but my impression is there's a lot of talk and people wanting to make sales, and people have been confused, and they're naturally cautious. So we've tried to make it a digestible document that doesn't compromise on accuracy.
No, that's what I liked about it. I was reading through it, and I think I want to ask some of the questions that were on there because we, the document is obviously going to answer it a lot better than what we're going to do in a lot more detail. But I'd like to at least go through some of the questions and get a quick answer that we can talk through. So, first thing it says is, what is a full range of wavelengths used for disinfection, and what is the effectiveness of each? I mean, to sum that up, there's not a quick answer to that, but what would you say to that? How would you answer that?
185 to 405. Is that short enough?
That's short. There you go. That's what you need to know.
But it seemed like there was more effectiveness for different things within that
That's
range.
right.
Yes.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So when you're down when it's 405, it's right on that edge between ultraviolet and visible. And one of the things that we show is that you need a lot of energy, electric energy, to make that work, and it may take us several days to mitigate bacteria, but it's not going to do anything for the coronavirus that's suspended in the air. Whereas something like 265 or more commonly 254 has that peak absorption by nucleic acid, RNA, DNA, and that is what you want to apply mostly to those airborne viruses. Now, if you get down into below about 220 nanometers, you now start to produce ozone, which can also be effective, but again, for surface disinfection, bacteria and fungus primarily. So each one, except for UVB, which you just want to avoid, UVA, visible, UVC in that range of 250 to 275, all the way down to 222 has been touted as a low penetration application, and then again down into ozone when you get below 200 nanometers or 220 nanometers, something like that. So each has its application, and each has, importantly, a different dose required to be effective for what you're trying to treat, and that's what we try to sort through.
Yeah, it does a really good job. So again, you could listen to this, but you better read that too, in addition to what we're talking here. Next question it asks is the electric light source technologies that are currently on the market that produce UV and their UV region or UV spectrum. We know there's fluorescent, there's LED.
There's no fluorescent. There's no fluorescent.
I'm sorry, not
There's
fluorescent.
mercury lamps. You got it now, buddy. I got it last time. There's only mercury lamps, brother.
And we call them local discharge just to avoid that very problem. So yes,
that's the way to do it.
I wasn't going to correct you though. I was trying to be a polite guest. And I wasn't going to do that. Thank you.
Thanks. So we got those. Is there any other technologies that we need to cover or know about?
Well, I think right now it's a cost issue, and we have a lot of experience with 254, which is the low pressure discharge peak emission. But it's still off the peak of what DNA and RNA absorb. And so people are now moving to LEDs, which are expensive to deliver the same amount of dose. But on the other hand, it's rapidly evolving, and I think we'll see that coming on board. Then you have the Eczema lamps, which are different than fluorescent, but they have a different emission spectrum. And there's a lot of discussion now with emissions at 222 nanometers. And the reason that people at least potentially like that is that it has low penetration depth, so you're not going to get sunburn, erythema, and there's no carcinogenic effect because it has shallow penetration. Now, the downside is that all UV is a line of sight technology. Most things we have in architectural applications don't reflect UV much at all. And so if you get something in a little tiny crack or crevice in the shadow of that UV, it's not going to make any difference at all. Plus, those viruses will sometimes be encapsulated, not just in spit, but there will be other things that are there. And if you have shallow penetration, then it's not going to actually reach the RNA for that virus. I say the jury's still out a bit. One of the things you have to be particularly aware of more than skin is the cornea, the eyes, which are particularly sensitive. And so that's yet to be demonstrated to be. I think it's true that skin's probably not going to be particularly affected by 222, and it's probably true that cornea won't either. But again, I think we should err on the side of caution on some of these things. And again, its efficacy is yet to be completely demonstrated. It's a great theoretical idea, but I think, as we say in the report, stay tuned.
No, but you're talking about specifically surface disinfection there, correct?
Yes. Well, no, I think that it can also deal with airborne viruses as well, 222. So I think, but it's again a dose issue, and you have to make sure that you have sufficient radiant power and exposure time to really be effective. But you can do your sums, although I will say that the calculation procedures are much more robust and well understood around 250 to 275. There's still some uncertainty about the exact dose that would be at 222 to be effective. Again, there wasn't any science to back that up. So this is a new technology, may be great, and it may prove to be the technology, but I think we're still, as I said, staying tuned to further developments.
Well, we do know that 254 or low pressure or mercury lamps or whatever the terminology we're using is, we know that they're effective in tuberculosis wards. Like, we know that works and reduces viral load and exposure or whatever, aerosols. I don't know what the correct term is, but I mean, those have been used for decades and decades. This 222 is something we're looking for safe exposure on the human skin, whereas in the past they would point them up at the ceiling and allow the air to pass over top of it, killing any viruses in that, and then maybe shine them on the floor, and then on the floor and on the air, and then there's a space in between where humans would walk in those places. So I think that there needs to be some understanding that there are things we know for sure, though, right, and that we know work. But what you're talking about here is if humans are being exposed to this light. That's the difference. Like, if it's pointed down for surface disinfection, what is the effect on the human beings that are intermittently in that space or all the time in that space or what have you? Is that a correct understanding?
Yeah, and on the pathogen itself, like I said, you may do something in the laboratory that makes sense, but then in practice may be relatively ineffective. I do want to add an innovation that is worth, again, stay tuned, but GE Kern has produced a low irradiance UVC, I believe it's around 265 nanometers emissions, an LED, low power. But the way they get to the prescribed dose is longer exposure times. That's what they're assuming. Now, the question I think is that if you have to wait minutes, hours to reach your dose, it may not be as effective as the 254, which has high radiance, but you only need a short amount of time to actually inactivate the virus. But from a straight physics calculation point of view, lower radiance and long durations have the same dose as high radiance and short durations. So in theory, it should work. But again, I think those two technologies, which you can't keep North Americans from inventing, have come about, and we have our tried and true, as you point out, but it may be that more effective, more energy effective is going to be some new technology that hasn't been fully proven yet. So we're, again, excited to see it and hope to continue running in parallel with those developments.
Now, the next question is we're not going to get into all the different types because you can read that, but we're out there. Michael and I are out selling lighting, and we have been asked, like, what should I put in here if I want to do a UV light? So, from your opinion, if you were going to pick a type, what is the most effective type of UV lighting or whatever we want to call it to install in a? I know the application is going to matter and all that, but let's say your general office building, they want UV lighting. That's what they tell you.
Well, induct and upper air, which Mike's already pointed out, are tried and true. They work. I think that, and again, I think we're all obsessed with coronavirus, and that's an airborne thing and you need to treat while people are in the room. And so I would put that at the top of the list because we know how to handle it. We have a practical experience and it works. The other things, surface disinfections, we just completed a study showing that UVA can be effective for reducing bacteria on surfaces, but it's not going to be effective for coronavirus. So you have to decide what it is you're trying to do. Do you want air? Do you want the room occupied? Don't want it occupied, don't care. And you always have to remember with UV that it's a line of sight technology. Anything, if you want to run it down a bus, there's going to be shadows. And so unless you have highly reflective materials, which you do get on some shiny surfaces in the bus handles and things like that, but I can't see it myself. It would be too spotty. And
Yeah.
you
Well,
think and you have to really have it.
The other question I have is, do we really want to be killing all these microbes all the time? Like that's a question, right? It's like we're covered in bacteria. Like I remember the famous National Geographic article that came out, I don't know, 10 years ago. We're superorganisms. We're actually made up of all different manner of flora and fauna. Or I don't know if that's the right term or not. I'm sounding stupid to scientists or not, but we're made up of all different kinds of things. And so are these surfaces, and some of them are benign and some of them are a few of them are actually quite dangerous to us, and some of them are minorly dangerous to us, and so on. But is this, sanitation? What are the effects of constantly sanitize? It's not wrong word. Constantly disinfecting everything all the time with UVC, like the way that we started with antibiotics. And, this is a miracle. There's no consequences to this. Yeah, you got a cold, take antibiotics. You got this, you got acne on your face, take antibiotics. Give it to the cows, give it to the pigs, give it to everything. And next thing you know, the viruses overcome 220 nanometers now. They don't care about 220 nanometers anymore. There's a new corona strain that just came out. No more 220. We're good to go. Like, at what point does the disinfection go too far, where it's now we've created super coronavirus or something like that?
Well, you really ask a really good question, as long as it was. So kind of part about it. They say that you should make your kids eat dirt for the reasons you're talking about. That you build up immunity, and if you continue to eat dirt, you'll always be healthy, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But when you go to MRSA or some of these hospital-acquired infections in a hospital, these things have evolved to the point where I just want it sterilized, period. Because you don't have any way to combat them differently, and getting rid of them is what you want to do. And things like UVA applications in hospitals can be effective as a supplement to cleaning.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm in a hospital, I just want it sterilized, period, right? Because I'm sick, I'm vulnerable, I don't do that. But doesn't mean I shouldn't go home and eat dirt. But you have a whole different strain that the risks are much higher. Now, you've mentioned the evolution, if you will, of these bacteria, potentially viruses, to do that. The beauty of UVC is that you're going right to the replication mechanism. If you can break down DNA and scramble it, then you're going to not be very likely to reproduce again. So it does seem to be qualitatively better to go right after the DNA. But if you use other types, which don't do that, what we call indirect inactivation, then you do have the potential for evolution of superbugs like we have with MRSA, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a risk benefit. I don't care about coronavirus evolving. I want it gone right now, or I want a vaccine. But you have a cold. Okay, maybe I can live with that, and that's all right. So it's a risk issue that you've got to ask yourselves. And right now, I think hospital-acquired infections and airborne coronavirus are the two things we really need to go after and try to solve that. And I think UV is going to be a good candidate for not, as you pointed out, antibacterial agents, of which the not keeping your proper dose and making sure you come off of it. You really have a kill that is going with UV that is going to limit the ability of that virus to replicate. And so I think that's a good thing that is qualitatively different. Now, I want to make one more point because you just had a long question, so I get a long answer, right? We've been working in plant pathogens specific to things called powdery mildew, which is devastating to strawberries and grapes and so on. And what we found, not we, but our teammates in Norway found that if you dose it during the night, you can be much more effective. Well, why would it be different than night versus day? Well, these pathogens have evolved a repair mechanism. So the blue light actually repairs the DNA. So if you just give them UV at night, there is no blue light at night, obviously, like there would be during the day. So that organism can't repair its DNA mechanism. We have similar things going on with humans too. Not the same thing as plants, and it's a little more complicated, but we do have repair mechanisms for DNA damage. And we do that every day after exposure. So this is the other side we need to think about, and more sympathetic to your point. If we are applying light or optical radiation that actually disables our repair mechanisms, that can be a real problem too, right? So we have to. There's a lot more research that needs to be done. And I'll have to say that I think LEDs are going to make it much more practical to do the science than ever before, because we were kind of stuck with 254. We know a lot about it, but now we've got some other options. And we're exploring things right now specific to promoting vitamin D production, particularly in the winter in Canada, where you don't get your sunlight exposure. But we couldn't have done that without LEDs, where we can actually calculate what a prescribed dose is for that. So I think it's, like I said, lighting's not dead. It's just we need to stop thinking of it as a commodity and begin to think where the opportunities lie for the science to deliver totally new applications. So I think it's
good.
A new day.
I often compare it to like when we went to Horticon 2019, Greg. There was academics and there was manufacturers. There was like an industrial and a contractor crowd there, and there was like when you were listening to them speak in the roundtable discussions, there was a meeting of the minds between those three sections of that business: the people who installed it, the people who made it, and the growers as well. The four sections: the growers and the academics, and they all agreed, and this is how you do it, and da da da. And so that they were able to build products, design systems, install them to improve yield, and not just on cannabis. I mean, in all manner of leafy greens and fruit and strawberries and all that sort of stuff. But I don't see that right now, both in UVC and with health of healthy lighting systems. There doesn't seem to be really. We're not at the point where everyone's going yes, yes, yes. It's I think application specific. So you take surface disinfection, airport bathroom. What a great application for that. Hospitals. I see an application for that. But nobody's saying, yeah, do this, or this is the fixture, or, there's no sales rep coming to Atlas Lighting saying, okay, these are the cut sheets now, son. This one is for the airport bathroom. This one is for the thing. We're not there yet. And how far out do you think we are from that?
Well, I was hoping you'd tell me. I'll speculate. May I? And I'm pleased I don't. No one visited me from above recently, so it is speculation. I think, Michael, things are moving more to applications than products. When all you have to do is put a pancake of illumination on a flat surface, the problem becomes what's the most efficient product, what's the cost, and so on. But now you got to get fancier. If it's a line of sight technology, then what do I do exactly? I can't just stick it in the ceiling and hope for the best. So, it also takes us potentially out of lighting per se. So if your goal is to reduce surface bacteria, you may need cleaning agents, Clorox, as well as lighting to do that. And you say, well, I don't do Clorox. And so you end up, with an incomplete solution. So I'm of the opinion that, again, coming back to why we moved to a medical school, I think they're more interested in outcomes than they are in technologies per se. Because there's an old expression, you've heard it, is, if the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So lighting can't do everything, but in the medical, they don't care. They just want something that works. And I personally feel more comfortable with that application focus rather than product focus. But that's speculation. I mean, I don't know. I'd like to hear your opinion.
Greg. I think, I was just pointing at Greg, but just to comment on that, I think the applications need to be defined and then they need to be assigned a certain technology. Okay. And I think if you say like airport bathrooms, it just jumps in my head. It's like, oh, the stall has a sensor on it. The light, the UVC light comes on when the space is unoccupied and it just blasts it. And if that's 254 or 222, whatever, it just hammers it with that. Because there's also aerosols.
What do you do under the seat?
Well, no, this is where I was. Well, this is where I think tape lighting applications come in very powerfully. Like the whole tape lighting industry, you take companies like Kevin Wolf's company, Elemental LED. They have very, very interesting ways of deploying flexible tape light, and very, very interesting. And if it could creep its way into that, you'd have all manner of opportunities to put stuff to use different things. So I think the application with the technology types and then the different ways of illuminating would be like, that's the first thing. But the second thing is how important, and I've brought this up and everybody gives me a little like, what? I think hygiene theater might be the most important part of this. Like the biggest effect. Oh,
sorry, Mike. You broke.
I think the biggest favor the lighting industry could do for the world is to produce hygiene theater with the light fixtures or with whatever you're deploying. And that means like when you go into I'm going to say the airport bathroom, or when you're in the train station, the fixtures that are UVC that are doing the upper air disinfection are very visible. And in fact, there's a light on them that says that they're doing what they're doing. And so people become more comfortable. Now, what does the impact have to be? I don't know. Is 2% good enough? Or 6%? We talked to a lot of scientists that say it's going to be impossible to measure the effect of all these different upper air disinfection in Grand Central Station. The variables change all the time: the temperature, the weather, the age of the light. They're all from the water business, Mark, where they have a pipe. This is the flow rate. This many gallons of water. We smash it with this much UVC. Water's clean, right? They have all the variables controlled. They know exactly what they're doing. Whereas you're putting it into places, they're all different. And being able to calculate the effect is largely going to be impossible for lighting distributors and contractors and maybe engineers down the road. They'll be able to figure this out. But I think hygiene theater, the fact that we've done something and contributed something, is as important as its efficacy. Is that the efficacy? That's the word I'm looking for. What do you think about that? I know it sounds like I'm pulling out the old lighting industry. Want to buy the letter I? This cures lighting seasonal affective disorder, right? The old lighting industry marketing stuff. But I think that's important right now to get people back into shopping malls, to get people back into train stations. I don't know. Am I wrong?
No, not at all. I think, though, that there's a mindset that you alluded to that, and again, I don't want to paint with too broad a brush, but if you're trained as an engineer, you have an equation and all those variables, as you point out, you fill those in. I can control this, I can control that. But there's a whole different thing with epidemiology that simply looks at probabilities. And so if you do as you say, and you have some way of assessing before and after, then you can make on a probabilistic basis that your intervention has been cost effective. You can't prove it with a firm equation, but you can do it by looking at the uncertainty. So if, for example, that's how smoking got identified as a health risk. It was done statistically that people that smoke 3 packs a day or 1 pack a day or no did have a statistical relationship, reduced emphysema. Does that mean that your 85-year-old grandfather who smoked 3 packs a day has got emphysema? No, but it certainly statistically is borne out, and now I think we, as a society, have accepted it as a real health risk. So if we can work in the same way so that UV applications are a real health benefit, statistically, I think that can be incorporated into the psyche. I want to say one thing, though, that our observations in the field are that there's a lot of people that are just generally frightened about anything that says it's UV. And if you say UV radiation, which is technically correct, people think, "Oh, I'm not eating those strawberries. They were radiated by UV," And I'm just saying it's not just ones and twos, but there's a significant proportion of the population that just says, "I'm steering away from UV, period." So if you put it in Grand Central and somebody says, "Well, you're just causing us harm because you got UV radiation in the Grand Central," you may have a significant dent in the acceptance of that technology wherever. And I think that has to be addressed. We have, as a lighting industry, be able to talk about the safe application of UV. And it's an old technology, as we've already discussed. And it was in favor in the 40s and went out of favor because we had antibacterial agents, and now it's something we have to revisit. But I think just telling the public that it can be applied safely is going to be another challenge for the lighting industry.
Well, you see with the vaccine, you see there's a massive amount of healthcare workers, like never mind general public. Like you have people in, I read a report that 60% of healthcare workers in some state were refusing the vaccine. And,
we heard about the guy that left it out of the refrigerator because he didn't believe in it. And he was a healthcare worker that took a dose of the Pfizer vaccine and let it get warm. So it was because he didn't think it was safe to use. So yes, and I think UV has a similar problem.
Yeah, a lot of people who hear radiation, they think nuclear waste, right? They don't think about light. It's like Fred Van Leerop told us that don't use the word radiation ever. Never use the word radiation. Talk about light. Never use that word.
That's right. That's my experience too. Absolutely.
Yeah. So this next one, I want to spoil the answer to and ask the real question. So the question is, what performance standards are currently available? And as of right now, there aren't any standards. When will there be standards available for UV lighting applications?
Well, I think Michael nailed it. It's just so much uncertainty, right? I mean, and whatever standard you have, there's going to be exceptions, and I think it's going to be difficult. So I think we should mentally move to the point about probabilistic interventions rather than a standard. You shouldn't have more than 20 joules per meter squared. I mean, well, Am I doing fungus? Am I doing airborne? Am I, and those things really get complicated. And then it also depends on what your kill rate is. I mean, are you trying to kill 90% or 99% or 99.9% of whatever virus is? And we have no ways to even detect whether we did anything anyway. So I'd say it's the wrong question, Greg.
Well, here's what I would say. I would say that can we use the existing engineering? Because Oliver, I can't remember his last name though, but he was the president of the UV Association of the World. I can't remember what it's called, but
Oliver Lawal.
Oliver Lawal, right? He said, look, this is not even science anymore. This is just engineering. But what he was saying specifically, I think, with upper air disinfection, it's just engineering. You guys can do it right now. You don't have to wait, right? And so I think before there's any standards, I think we have to separate it out into like upper air passive, upper air active, surface. Like those are three completely different things. Right. And then there's the ducting. The ducting is a no-brainer. Actually, so many of my customers, when they called me to ask about UVC, I would ask them, does your HVAC system have UVC in it already? And they're like, I don't know. I said, well, go find out. They go find out, and there's, oh, shit, bulbs have been burned out for 20 years.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like a lot. There's a lot of this already out there, right? So, we have to break it up into the chunks it belongs. And, upper air disinfection is 100% safe if done properly. And it works. How much it works, impossible to know. What's that?
I'll tell you an anecdote. I had a call from Boston schools, and they were confused. This is back probably in April, maybe May. And I went through the upper air thing, and he says, we'll never do that. These kids will stand on a desk. And, it's one of those things you didn't realize. So, yeah, it sounds good, but kids will stand on desks and have a look at it. So you're just having a hard time with. I mean, we all believe in it, and it works. There's no question about it. But if people do stupid stuff, either out of ignorance or just plain orneriness, I don't know.
Yeah, and you also have kind of answered this already, but properly and safely measure UV and verify its effectiveness. And this document, again, gives you all these different ways you can do it. Is there ever going to be a practical way that I can go into a school and say, all right, look, here's what it will do, and without having all this science and spectroradiometer and whatever else, what's an easy way I can prove our point that it works? Just tell them? Believe me.
Well, this is... we had a lot of internal discussions, and one of the things we all look for are what we call closed loop systems. And that is that you have a sensor, you feed back, and you adjust the flow rate or whatever it is based upon what the sensor's telling you. We don't really have any robust sensors for coronavirus. I mean, we don't know if we did it with the best intentions, whether we ever had it in the first place. So, until we have a way of measuring the direct effects that intervention, whether it's lighting or it's Clorox, we're guessing about whether we wasted our time and effort and money or we didn't. So I think, in my opinion, the most important thing to work on, not just in lighting, but are sensors that allow us to more quickly give feedback into a system to know that, gee, we got a high load of coronavirus coming in or a high probability. Now we want to crank it up. We want to do the things, and we get the kids off the test so they don't stand up. It's that information that you got to have, that the only way you can do it is to actually look at the pathogen of interest. And when we work at Memorial Hospital in South Bend, Indiana, and they have routine measurements of these hospital-acquired infections, and that's what they need to do. And then if they get a count of MRSA, say, they send in a SWAT team to figure out what they need to do. That is the effective way to do this. You can't just do wishful thinking. Well, I put in a UV system in my ductwork, I guess I'm safe. You have no idea until you can actually measure the pathogen you're trying to get. And fungus, which is one of the things in air disinfection, is much harder to kill with UV than virus. And so maybe you're doing fine on viruses, but there are fungal growths in your duct system too. So it's not easy. I know you guys want something easy, but it
Yeah.
isn't. I'm sorry.
No, I actually, I'm very interested. You know, there's nothing like that now. But you know what? You know what was funny? I don't know if it was Adam that told us this, Greg, Adam Lillian, or not. I can't remember who it was, but one of the people that said to me, "Listen, you want to prevent transmission of coronavirus?" He said, "You got to exchange the air in a room as much as possible. Forget about purifying it. Get the old air outside and bring in new air from outside." And he said, just have that happening at the fastest velocity you can. Forget about trying to clean it with UVC light or anything like that. Just exchange the air. And I think in homes they call this in your house it's called the oh man. Anyway, there's systems
Air
that
exchanger?
no, it's
Yeah,
not.
I
There's a
think
name
that's all
for it.
it is.
HRV. It's called HRV. I can't remember. I don't know what it stands
Okay.
for. Scotty, look up what HRV stands for. So, but anyway, what it does is it sucks a lot of the air in the room out, expresses it to the outside of the home, and then pushes air, warms air from the outside as it comes in, and it's exchanging the air in the space. That's by far extremely effective at eliminating germs in all interior environments, airborne germs.
You're absolutely right, but it's expensive. And so if you can, for example, with a lighting technology, have equivalent air exchangers at a much lower cost, then that's attractive. But yeah, sure. I mean, if you want to prevent coronavirus, just go outside and wear a mask. We're all done. But, that's going to be tough to work on that way too. So you have to think about the cost and the inconvenience also. And, high air exchanges are not quiet. I mean,
Yep.
is that what you want to listen to all day? So my point is, there are these collateral issues,
Sure.
and I think UV does have a place that we can have equivalence to air exchanges, and understanding what the equivalence is. Then I can make a cost benefit analysis. But again, I still don't know whether I wasted all my money because I never had coronavirus in the first place.
Yeah,
and
for
until
sure.
we can measure that, we're just guessing if we've done any intervention that really makes a difference.
But what they know that natural light in schools works, where they measured the ones with sun tunnels and the ones with windows, and they didn't realize that it was actually the natural light that was having the effect until the classrooms with sun tunnels had an increase in performance, as well as the classrooms with windows compared to those without windows. And that was really what really.
Hang on. That's
Okay.
a misconception.
Okay. Okay.
First of all, sunlight has no UVC in it.
No, I'm not talking about UVC. I'm talking about better lighting. I wasn't referring to UVC. Exactly.
Oh,
I know UV. I know UVC. Like I was saying that they knew that happened. So what I'm saying is, statistically over time, we would be able to gather data on classrooms that had no, and you compile that data, like the smoking, and eventually you can see, yes, actually there's less sick days in the schools that have the active or what. But I think it needs to be broken up, and I think what we could deploy right now, if I'm not wrong, is active air disinfection machines, something that sucks the air in the room, passes it through a UVC lamp that does not show anyone's eyes, and then pushes it back into the room. We could do that right now, could we not, Mark Ray?
Well, it's a dose issue. If you move that air too fast, or you have too low a radiance in that cylinder that does it, you're not going to make any difference. It all comes down to dose. So, and it depends on whether you're trying to do tuberculosis, which is a bacterium, or you want to do coronavirus. So coronavirus is more susceptible. You need a lower dose to be equally effective. But if you're trying to do TB, that isn't going to work very well. So you have to have a dose. So we actually looked at those in the report, and some of them, the radiances were too low and the air velocity is too high to make any difference at all. You're just wasting electricity fundamentally. So you got to do your sums, and then you make the decision. So I don't like to paint with a broad brush, but I come back to your point, Greg. As long as you understand what you're doing in duct systems, is it fungus? Is it virus? You can actually prescribe something and engineer something. Same with upper air. And as long as you don't have teenagers standing on desks, it's a pretty effective way to do it. And I would say that is where we should go now. That doesn't mean that these new innovations with lower radiance and longer duration 265 LEDs or 222 Eczema lamps are not going to work. That's not what I'm saying. But I just think that we don't know for sure at this point. But that doesn't mean we should sit on our hands and do nothing. So I think I'm agreeing with your very first comment, Greg, that we should do something now, and that's safe and effective.
Yeah, a couple more questions on here. Is it that we've talked a lot about it, but just codes and regulations that exist from UV building. There really isn't any. Again, I mean, they're developing them, is what this document is telling us. Is there anything unique that we need to be aware of and be ready for?
No, sorry. It's most of the stuff that's out there is tried and true.
Yep.
New stuff, we don't have any standards for those.
Do we have standards?
too.
Hang on, we have standards for upper air disinfection. Like I have a Philips catalog from the 70s that prescribes how to do it. It shows you the watts per meters cubed or something like that was the times this. And, this much UV radiation. You look at the lamp has a wattage and then a UV wattage and whatever, and it's this many watts per meters cubed. And you mount the fixtures at this height and this far from the floor to shine down on the floor, that. And that's super effective as the air goes through the room. It kills anything that passes above that. So we have standards for upper air disinfection now?
Yeah, I mean, they've been applied. Rich Vincent has done a lot of work. He's also at Mount Sinai, and, those things have been around a long time. I mean, I can't remember the guy in Boston he worked with, which does it so. And I believe those are all fairly well prescribed about what in this case, for tuberculosis. Now, they were also looking for anthrax for, this was in 2002, right after 9/11. People worried about that too. So again, there's some uncertainty about viruses and bacteria, and qualitatively, viruses need a lower dose than bacteria, but not always. There's an overlap and so on. So it depends on what you're trying to kill and what kill rate you're looking at, or inactivation rate, I should say. So, but yeah, I think those are all pretty well prescribed. And, the people at Philips, I mean, in the 1990s, it's sharp people. They knew what they were doing. So I'm sure and we used a lot of the stuff from Sylvania early on for our water disinfection. So Bob Levin, who was their chief scientist, he's probably a world expert on UV, and they put out a document. So when I edited the IS handbooks, we relied a lot on the Sylvania data to put in the handbook. So, but I hate to say it because I'm one, but old timers aren't around anymore, and now all of a sudden it's like UV is a new thing, but it's not. David Sliney was talking about UV in a recent webinar. That was excellent. But he's also been around a long time and has a long history of understanding how that technology can be applied. So I think that upper air is pretty well defined in what you need to do. The manufacturers know it, the scientists know it, and that's where I'd start for any treatment for coronavirus. Not for surface disinfection. I don't think that's not what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. The other question here that I just want to touch on too is the potential of UV lighting, and again, it's going to depend on the type you're using, causing any damage to surfaces or objects over time. What is your quick statement on that?
Yes, it will, unless you put in fixers, which, for example, outdoor plastic, chairs and tables and stuff, you can put in these chemical additives that are resistant to UV. But if you don't do that, and most of indoor stuff isn't specified that way, then you can have a problem. But you don't know. I heard an anecdote that some of the tubing in hospitals is sensitive to UV. I don't know that to be true, but we put rubber bands under ozone, in less than an hour they were gone. I mean, so you have to be aware of what UV or even short wavelength visible will degrade. There's a high energy there. So, for example, in art museums, it isn't just UV; it's short wavelength visible that is also can be very damaging to materials like watercolors. There are ways to try to measure that, and we've done that in that recent report we did in the hospital. But it's once you have your equipment in there, you don't know whether there was any additive put to it or not. You just don't know. But I think if UV becomes more common, we'll see more of these chemical additives to prevent, brittle and fading.
And then it also touches on energy implications. Anything in particular we should need to be aware of with UV lighting and energy?
I'm a believer that you should use energy if it's effective. I'm not a zealot that says, zero energy use and so on. But if you are looking at long wavelengths, UVA and visible, you're going to need long doses to be effective. And of course, long doses means you're operating it for a long time at relatively high irradiances. So if you're looking at bacterial interventions, you're going to have to spend some energy to really be effective that way. So I'm okay with that. But you need to be aware that it will be an energy penalty for indirect inactivation of bacteria and viruses on surfaces.
So after going through all this, is it safe to say that this abstract and this whole discussion is evolving and will continue to evolve?
Yeah, but I like to think, Greg, that it's a stake in the ground. Obviously, it's not a final answer, but I do think it gives the lighting community something to a foothold on what to do next. And, I think the LRC's always been, philosophy is always translational. Take the best science, try to make it useful. And I think this document is that, but it's definitely not the final answer. I would never claim that. And again, there's a lot of knowledge out there. People like David Sliney, who know a lot about this topic, and he's a real resource for this.
Well, Mark Ray, it's almost been an hour. I can't believe it. Just looked at the clock right now. We've spoken for 54 minutes, if you can believe it.
Well, you had all these long questions. What can I do?
You need this talk time.
Woo!
Come on there.
Yeah, I really appreciate the work that the LRC does and what you've done. And, there's been a lot of response to the lighting industry has been fast but measured. And we've been monitoring and watching it. And it seems like UVC, it's like one of these things, you have this bomb goes off and it explodes, right? You think, oh my God, and then, like the bubble that bursted in 2000 or whatever, there's always something left that's really legitimate after the bubble goes off, And I think that's what we're starting to carve out as an industry, distributors and contractors and scientists and manufacturers. I have one more question. Are we missing manufacturer leadership in this business on this issue right now? Like, wouldn't it be great to have GE, Sylvania, and Philips just cracking away at this the way they would in the old days?
Well, I can't speak for manufacturers in total, but we do work reasonably well with GE Current, and they are innovating.
Are they?
They've got a UVA product and they've got a UVC product. And of course, you have healthy lighting, which is using the Eczema lamp. So I'm not sure about leadership as a whole industry, but there are certain companies that are really trying to make a contribution. And then there's some that don't know any better. Mm-hmm. So, it's like I said, these examples, these floor standing ones that have a UV lamp inside, and then you pass the air over so fast, it's not going to be very effective at all. Now, good intentions, but I don't know. Is that a lack of leadership or just a lack of understanding? So I don't know, but I do know that some exceptions, like GE Current, I think they have really good technical people and they're trying to do the right thing.
I know Signify is working on it too, but we're coming up on an hour now. Mark Ray, thank you for coming on the show and talking to us. Greg,
yeah, you guys are great. I mean, You make a big difference to the industry, and I just flattered that you asked me. So maybe we'll do it again sometime.
Whew. Absolutely. That could be the best compliment we've ever gotten.
Thank you, sir.
Shame on everybody else.
Thank you, Mark. The original coming out hot with the UV, son. That's ENERGYFOCUS.com, Greggy. Woo!
That's right. They're getting in the UVC lighting. They've got some product coming out hot and ready. They got the best names in the business by far, integrating UV in all three of their products. It's Nuvo, a portable UV disinfection tower. They got Above, which is going to be above you. I get that. And it's going to be a disinfection troffer, LED troffer. And then they've got Move, an autonomous UVC surface disinfection, a robot. Come on, man. They've got robots.
I thought you were a robot when I first met you. Oh, man. Energy Focus coming in hot. That's a science-driven company, though, too, man. Don't forget. They got scientists working there legit. John Davenport. I can't remember what the other fellow's name is. I'm just dropping it right now. There's another one there as well. But, man, they're science-driven, man. And so
when you're thinking about product like this, you need science behind it. You can't just slap a label on it and throw it out to everyone. You need science.
You know why? Because bad lighting does kill people, actually. I shouldn't say that. But I was going to say, in the past, in the lighting business, if you did a crappy job, it didn't really matter that much because people could still see, kind of, right?
Yeah.
But with UV, you got to get it right. So you got to go to the original, ENERGYFOCUS.com. And, of course, the members of the National Association of Innovative Lighting Distributors, where the best education resides with LS Evolve. And, of course, Mark Ray, hey, man, what a pleasure to talk to you. Honor. And we really appreciate all your work at the LRC and everything you're doing. Greg, that was an awesome interview.
That was great. Always good to talk to him, and got to continue on and do it again.
And, of course, you, our colleagues who listen and join us on this. The Silent Speaker. We love you guys. God bless.
Written on the rectory wall, there's a sign there for all. If you are lost, the Lord is there to find you.